Hey there, guys. All right, today we are back with the newest trope talk, though, of course, when this probably gets uploaded, it's going to be like a bit after Red uploaded this, as is usual sometimes with my reactions because of how I stockpile videos at a time, record a bunch and whatnot. Anyways, that's unnecessary yapping. This is Trickster Heroes. I'm not I'm not gonna try and make any guesses as to I'm going to assume Spider-Man probably fits. I don't know. I'm not quite sure what she means by trickster heroes here. So I even read the description. That didn't really clue me in on it any further. Um, so I'm not gonna really make any guesses as to what this could mean. Um, so let's just go ahead and dive right in.
Heroism is one of those really annoying things that doesn't have a clear cut definition in any meaningful sense, but so much of our understanding of storytelling and characterization.
I mean, yes and no. I feel like when we see something, we can pretty much off the top of our heads identify whether or not that action is heroic. So I do believe that we do have a set definition. It's just that then when we try to put it into words, that's where we struggle with it, right? Like we have this innate feeling towards the concept of heroism. I just don't think it's something that can necessarily be defined because by defining it, we're almost putting a limit on the concept of what is heroic, and there really isn't a limit on what, uh, right? Which I mean, I guess gets into also what she is saying, which is why I believe yes and no applies here to what she just said. But like, I don't know, am I making any sense?
Is built on it. The current dictionary angle highlights bravery, unselfishness, and nobility as the principles embodied by a hero, which sounds fine and dandy until you A. try to hold any of the archetypical ancient Greek heroes to the moral standard of unselfishness,
Yeah.
and B. notice that nobility as a core precept of heroism is a holdover from the feudalism days when the divine right of kings was more foundational to most people's worldviews than gravity. There's no other reason the word for inheriting social rank is the same word as traits that make you the best kind of person, or for that matter, why the word for common peasant is villain. I once went down an unhinged rabbit hole trying to cleanly define an anti-hero because it turns out if a concept doesn't have a definition, neither does its antithesis. Heroism is an ideal, a standard, a soft-edged concept heavily dependent on the snapshot of cultural context it forms in. It's not something we can lay strict parameters on, it's a vibe. And because it's a vibe, people are
Okay, yeah, essentially she's saying what I just said. um like I don't again, I still maybe this is just me being stubborn. Probably is. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like I mean, but yeah, we look back on the ancient Greek heroes and you could probably make the argument that for a lot of them we may not view them as heroes if we were not told that hey, this is a Greek hero, we probably wouldn't consider them a hero, you know?
are pretty good at feeling out when a character trait doesn't fit that vibe. An alleged hero can lose their goodwill and desert privileges very quickly if they don't check all the boxes on the current edition of the moral absolutism rubric. It's easy to be a protagonist. All you need for that is to keep the camera on you. Being a hero has standards, which is why it can be kind of complicated to make a trickster hero. Trickster characters in general are pretty simple. They're manipulative schemers who get what they want by fooling people into giving it to them.
That's what you mean.
Typically, their favored strategies include lying, stealing, sneaking, and generally doing everything in their power to not.
When I see the word trickster, honestly, my mind immediately kind of goes to more not Joker as in the villain Joker, but Joker like a Joker character, kind of like Spider-Man who makes quips and jokes and stuff like that. That's where my mind goes when I see the word trickster. I don't really associate it to its actual more genuine definition of the word, which is right as she has here, one who tricks, a dishonest character who gets what they want by manipulation. That's not what I think of when I think of trickster. When I think of trickster, I think of a goofball.
Not be wholly perceived and understood, because if that happens, it gives the game away and makes their plans eminently thwartable, which is a pretty complicated set of characteristics to give to a hero. Now again, part of this is because of my perennial nemesis, the fact that hero does not actually have a solid definition. For instance, while trickster traits might feel fairly antithetical to an America-centric cultural concept of what heroism looks like, there are a metric buttload of trickster gods and culture heroes that maybe spend a slice of their time playing antagonist, causing problems for the rest of the pantheon, but the bulk of their time is spent as the hero, winning personal victories or contributing to the creation and shaping of the world through cunning schemes. Tricksters are such a staple of worldwide folklore and mythology that there's whole swaths of study dedicated to conspiracy boarding why they're like that. For an easy handful of examples, various versions of Coyote and Raven crop up as trickster
It fucking windy.
figures in several indigenous North American cultures. Anansi originated in West Africa and gets up to a lot of hijinks that later got blended together with other trickster figures like Brer Rabbit. Loki is obviously a pretty archetypical trickster and schemer in the space of Norse mythology, with the interesting twist that he gets his ass kicked a lot, and the secondary twist that chief god Odin is also a trickster figure while also being 100% the boss. And then you get powerhouses like Sun Wukong, who, despite having the power of god and anime on his side, continually has to use sneaky tactics and shapeshifting to outwit the opponents he can't just punch through a mountain or two. There's a lot of interesting threads through various mythological trickster stories that we're not even going to try to fully unpack here, but do have some interesting implications for the discussion of trickster heroes. For one thing, a lot of these mythological tricksters have a tendency to use their tricks to help humanity, either accidentally or deliberately. One of the most iconic examples of that is Prometheus purposefully stealing fire from the gods and giving it to humanity, which is an unconditional positive that he is very harshly punished for. You also get things like the Inuit story of frequent sneaky trickster Raven being the first teacher of humanity, getting everyone up to speed on the whole wearing clothes and dying less thing. A lot of Dene folklore about Coyote is pretty negative, but there's at least one story where he saves humanity from a child-eating giant by convincing him that letting Coyote break his leg will be great for his long-term child-eating career. So clearly, trickster traits and heroism, or at least protagonist status bundled with do-gooding, go hand in hand a lot. But I'm not presently qualified to delve into folkloric tricksters any deeper than I already have. And besides, we don't need to caveat heroism itself to justify the existence of trickster heroes. There are ways to make a protagonist heroic while still letting them get their scheme on, and that's a very interesting duality I'd like to explore. A trickster hero's primary skill set is in manipulating a situation to their advantage through cunning and trickery rather than brute force. Generally, they are in some way an underdog facing some sort of more powerful antagonist, and if they fought that antagonist on the terms the antagonist defined, they would 100% lose. This is a classic foil dynamic, where the protagonist and antagonist have contrasting qualities instead of being very similar to one another. A villain who is extremely strong and durable might get pitted against a hero who's fast and sneaky. A villain with a ton of money and political power, like a noble of some kind, might go up against someone without much of either. A villain with access to a powerful weapon will probably find themselves dealing with heroes that are hard to hit with it. You may note this isn't so much a battle of equals as it is an overwhelming antagonistic force facing heroes that need to work pretty hard to not just be flattened. Brute force can take a lot of forms, whether it's physical strength or social capital or political power or technological supremacy. In contexts where the villain is well situated to just bulldoze their enemies, the heroes will need strengths and strategies that make them much more unbulldozable, which is 100% a word. Merriam-Webster told me themselves. Now, because trickster
Prove it. Prove it, Red. Right now. Do it. I could look it up myself, but I'm not going to.
basically just describes a skill
Too lazy.
set, there's no real restrictions on a trickster character's personality or motivation. But in order for them to qualify as a trickster hero, that personality and motivation needs to be decently heroic. They need to be using their sneaky tricksterness for a good cause, or at least a sympathetic one. And again, because heroism is a vibes-based values judgment, the sneaky tricksterness can't be so over the top as to outweigh their good guy qualities. It's frequently considered heroic to be honest.
I mean, I think it essentially boils down to, like, again, the moral, like, lines here, like, what and the motivations here. Well, the outcome of your trickery, right? Is your trickery going to help our protagonists, protagonist doesn't necessarily mean hero, the good guys win, right? Like, are you going to help the good guys win? And right, here comes Star Wars. Andor, I think, is a great example, kind of trickster heroes, where we are seeing the complications of revolution, and the infighting that occurs within revolution through, and how a lot of the left-leaning machinations of revolution tend to fight with one another, right? You have the liberals who are more so the believers that you can change things from the inside, right? Liberals lie closer to the center, and then you have the leftists who are more violent about it, right? You have the leftists like Luthen Rail, who gives that amazing, played by Stellan Skarsgård, um, and that character believes in kind of, he is violent and he believes in, right, we have to force the hand of the Empire to essentially overreact, and that is what is going to get people to see how bad the Empire is, right? Is to get, because people will turn a blind eye so long as things are not affecting them. And so you have to make people see the bad that is happening. And in order to make, in Andor, to make people see these problems, that means he has to manipulate events so that the Empire cracks down on these people and gets violent with them, which is what we see in the climactic moments of Andor. Andor is just literally, quite honestly, might, I think Andor might be a legitimately perfect show. At least season 1. Gotta wait for season 2 and see if they maintain what they have set up. If they can maintain what they did for season 1 into season 2, might be the best show ever. But anyways, and then you have Nemec, who has his own leftist ideal, his own manifesto, his own, he is the more moral compass of the show. He is the that in some ways you may view him as the naive optimist when it comes to revolution and goodness and the ends, right? And the fight that they are currently fighting. Um, and then you have people like Saw Gerrera, who is like, I'm not working with anyone that doesn't agree with my beliefs. I'm not settling my differences with the other members of the revolution unless they agree with how I want to fight this thing, right? Saw Gerrera is very stiff as like, no, we're not going to work together. My disagreements with them are just as valid as my disagreements with the Empire, and are just as my disagreements with them I view are as just as problematic as the actions of the Empire, right? Um uh and so he believed, right, that's his belief. And he isn't necessarily wrong to believe that. I think it's in the show, he Luthen tries to get Saw to work with someone that was a former Confederate. Saw Gerrera was a part of see him in Clone. You meet him in Clone Wars. His planet is, he's leading like, I think, a rebellion against the Confederacy or something, and so of course it makes sense. Yeah, no, he's not going to work with a former Confederate, right? Um, Saw Gerrera believe like, and so that infighting is so good. And it kind of gets into this whole idea of trickster heroes, because we are seeing so many people who we would say are fighting the good fight. They are against the Empire. That would put them good. Um and right, you have Mon Mothma, who is trying to be a good guy by being on the inside, by being a member of the Galactic Senate. Um and we wouldn't call her necessarily a villain. Might be because we know who Mon Mothma becomes later in the progression of the rebellion, but we wouldn't, right? Even then, if you just know her from what she does in Andor, you wouldn't necessarily call her a villain, because yes, she is uh technically supporting, essentially by her being a part of it, she is supporting the legitimacy of the Imperial government. But she is trying to change it from the inside. I think it's, you can disagree with that, but ultimately that is what she thinks. She wholeheartedly believes, as of that moment in time, believes that this is what she can do. This is where she feels her strengths best lie in order to help the galaxy progress to a better future. And I wouldn't, right, while I disagree personally with at least the state of the Empire as it is within Andor, It is far too late for things to be able to be changed from the inside, and thus now violent action must be taken in order to take them down. That is my personal belief. I'm not gonna sit here and say that Mon Mothma is a bad person for still trying, right? So I would line her up as a trickster hero. Same with Luthen Rael. Saw Gerrera I wouldn't, because Saw Gerrera is very much, kind of, well, no, in some instances Saw is kind of trickery. Yeah. But anyways, go fucking watch Andor. It is great. Anti-fascist, anti-authoritarian art. It is literal art. It is a masterpiece. It is the best dialogue writing that Star Wars has ever had. It has a very concise plot. And it's just good. It's quite honestly, I do not know why Disney approved that, because Disney does not align with the values that Andor spouts. The themes and values that Andor is actively showing as, hey, this is the good side, right? Is not things that line up with Disney. I don't know how that got made. I don't but yeah, anyways, that was my tangent, my Star Wars tangent for the video.
Honorable and fight fair, but of course a trickster hero facing a powerful enemy is in a situation that is already unfair and blatantly skewed against them, and if they try to fight fair under those conditions, they're just gonna lose. The number one trait most trickster heroes share is that they're fundamentally reactive. All their lying and scheming is done in response to some powerful jerkface rocking up and causing problems. This already goes a long way towards making trickster qualities feel more heroic, because the target of their wrath is the instigator of the whole situation. Bugs Bunny doesn't start causing trouble until Elmer Fudd pokes his shotgun where it doesn't belong. This is also how most trickster superheroes work. Their very motivating origin stories are the result of bad guys causing problems in their presence, inspiring them to stand up and do something about it. Superheroes exist to solve problems, and if a superhero's power set doesn't just let them hit the problem till it goes away, they need to be sneakier and more creative about it. Probably the most classic trickster superhero is Spider-Man. He's smart, quippy, and
oh shit, okay, I was right.
creative with his powers, but most of his enemies are physical tanks like Rhino or Sandman or Venom. Spider-Man may be strong, but he's not Superman. He can't just punch people into orbit if they're getting inconveniently rowdy. Instead, he typically has to use the terrain to his advantage, luring his opponents into environmental hazards or exploiting some flaw he's noticed in their power set. Like the first time he fights the Rhino in Spectacular Spider-Man, he realizes Rhino has a huge overheating problem and lures him into the steam tunnels to knock him out with super heat stroke. The fact that this isn't exactly honorable chivalric combat doesn't do anything to diminish Spider-Man's heroism. It just makes him seem smart, and everything he's doing feels necessary because the extremely destructive bad guys he's stopping are very, very hard to stop. And there's another interesting element to a trickster hero's playbook. Usually a trickster hero stops the bad guy, not by doing things to the bad guy until they stop being a problem, but by convincing the bad guy to do things themselves that turn out to have undesirable outcomes. The agency is all on the villain, which is of course the problem the hero is facing when the story starts. The antagonist turns up to cause problems, and the protagonist doesn't have access to the kind of raw power that would let them just make the villain stop, so instead they have to shape the villain's actions until they either choose to stop causing problems or physically can't continue. The villain in this scenario isn't suffering anything they didn't literally bring on themselves. The only twist is that they didn't think it was going to affect them. It's a classic case of using the enemy's strength against them. An extremely textbook demonstration of this is an old Brer Rabbit story, where Brer Rabbit finds himself seized by his perennial nemesis and local carnivore Brer Fox. Faced with the prospect of being straight up eaten, he begs and pleads with Brer Fox to please, oh please, don't throw him into that briar patch over there. This wasn't something Brer Fox was previously considering. He was just gonna torture him a little bit and then eat him. But the more Brer Rabbit begs him not to throw him into that briar patch, the more Brer Fox wants to, just to make him suffer. In the end, he succumbs to temptation and yeets Brer Rabbit into the briar patch, only for Brer Rabbit to expertly navigate the briars without a scratch and vanish into the underbrush where Brer Fox can't follow. As he explains from a safe distance, Brer Rabbit was born and raised in a briar patch. This is a very classic con. A trickster hero faced with a cruel antagonist can convince them to do almost anything if they think it'll hurt somebody they want to see suffer. And more broadly, to generalize off this model, the number one way a trickster can get an antagonist to do what they want is to figure out what the antagonist wants and convince them they can get it by doing this one thing. If they want to hurt people, oh, oh, this would hurt me so much. If they want power, oh, this would make you so strong. If they want money, oh, I have so much cash and absolutely no street smarts. It would be a shame if somebody scammed me out of it. Leverage, being a con of the week show, always starts with our crew of heisting heroes figuring out what the villain of the week wants most and then building a scam about making them think they're going to give it to them. And leverage is a good segue into another way a writer can make a crew of schemers and scammers seem heroic by contrast. Beyond making them fundamentally reactive, give them somebody completely sympathetic to protect. A trickster fighting on their own behalf is in a slight gray area, no matter how terrible their enemy might be, since they're still putting their enemy through hell because of some personal slight. But a trickster fighting on behalf of a helpless innocent without a dishonest bone in their body is tapping directly into the foundational tenet of modern heroism: selflessness. Now their unheroic manipulative strategies are just a means to a very good end, and the more helpless and honest the victim, the more justified our hero's scheming will appear. This is also a very useful strategy a writer can use to make the antagonist more threatening, since if we only ever see them face off against a trickster hero that knows exactly how to run circles around them, they're going to come across as bumbling or even downright comedic, which is frequently the intent. But if the writer really wants to convince the audience that this overwhelmingly powerful bad guy needs to be taken down and they're too powerful for anyone to do it openly, it's very helpful to demonstrate what their villainous brute force looks like. So they'll dash an innocent person's dreams, gloat about how untouchable they are, taunt their victim to just try and make them face consequences, and march off with a local police force in their pocket, overall making it clear how absolutely on top of the world they are. These guys are trickster bait. They are so unbelievably awful that the audience wants to see them taken down, but so well established and well connected that the existing systems of authority that are supposed to stop that sort of thing are barely more than suggestions in their presence. Like with most cases of trickster bait, the only thing powerful enough to destroy them is themselves, and the trickster just needs to convince them it's a really good idea to do the things that make that happen. And this ties into one more thing that can make a trickster hero feel completely justified: if the villain is smug. Smugness is a very dangerous thing for a villain to indulge in because villains are, by their narrative nature, set up to fail, and a villain confident in their victory to the point of gloating about it is baiting the audience into seeing them defeated. Plenty of villains get a dignified defeat where they acknowledge a worthy opponent, or they get in one little token victory that keeps their downfall from feeling absolute. You can even defeat a villain in a way that does absolutely nothing to disprove their worldview if you've got a fondness for ambiguity or disappointment. A strong villain who gets defeated.
Oh, yeah. You know, Endgame is such a... For me, and I think for a lot of people, at least around like my friends and stuff, Endgame was one of those movies that's like, when you saw it for the first time, you were so enraptured with the just spectacle and essentially what was being accomplished with Endgame that like you were overlooking the problems of the storytelling. At least I was. And then I watched it a second time. And I thought it was not good. It had a whole lot of problems that I hadn't even like noticed the first time around. I didn't have right now that the spectacle of it had all worn off, and I'm watching Endgame after watching Infinity War. After rewatching Infinity War, I'm like, this movie is a letdown compared to Infinity War. Infinity War still holds up. Infinity War is a just all-around great movie. Endgame is pretty much just not, because of the time travel trope, not good. Because of the way in which they utilized time travel, the way in which they tried to like solve the problem, I did not think that was the right decision to make. It was just narratively unsatisfying for me. But I understand why they like had to make certain choices that they did. You know, right, with this, but anyways, yeah, it was good the first time you watch it, and then after that, it just like it's one of those movies that's just gonna get worse and worse the more you watch it. And so I've only watched it one other time after release, and that's kind of all I plan to watch it for.
By somebody stronger than them might be like, wow, I didn't know anyone was stronger than me. This defeat reaffirms my might-based value system and makes me want to get even stronger. A strong villain who gets defeated by somebody totally weak who did nothing but outsmart.
Yes, Aang is fully the Avatar, which is not weak, but Ozai sure thinks he is because he refuses to use the Avatar state who straight up murder him, and the way he actually beats Ozai is a combo of simple moves used precisely and cleverly, and spirit bend. Avatar: The Last Airbender is just one of those perfect shows.
Them is the kind of worldview shattering experience that might leave them rethinking their entire life. When a villain is smug, it means they're confident that they're untouchable in every way that matters. It's not just about whatever their villainous goal is, it's about making sure everybody knows how powerless they are to stop it. We don't just want to see villains lose, we want to see them proven wrong. And when the villain is smug, that means we want to see them utterly fall apart. This writing strategy comes up in several episodes of Columbo, an unusual detective show with an unusual trickster hero. It's kind of an inside-out whodunit where every episode starts with the audience seeing the villain of the week committing a murder and flawlessly covering it up. They're almost unilaterally ridiculously rich and powerful, and they all very cleverly construct a scenario that looks like a perfect murder. Not only are they sure they'll never be caught, most of the time they're sure they'll never even be suspected. And when the cops roll up in the opening of the episode, they typically take in the scene as presented and immediately come to the conclusion the killer wanted them to reach. All, that is, except for Lieutenant Columbo, a small jovial man in an extremely rumpled coat who only ever seems to be half paying attention. Columbo is an interestingly opaque character, because for the bulk of any given episode, he is being 100% dishonest. He'll lie about why he's turned up somewhere incriminating. He'll lie about not suspecting the villain of the week. He'll lie about how he totally buys their bullshit explanation covering over some flaw he pointed out in their alibi. He'll lie about his wife or his boss pushing him to spend more time with the villain, even though obviously he'd like to get out of their hair. This is so extreme that through the entire run of the show, the audience never sees his often referenced wife, and for the first few seasons, we never receive any evidence that she exists at all. And we never even learn his first name. We know almost nothing about this guy, and everything we learn is usually something he's telling the villain of the week that therefore can't be trusted. He usually favors softball lies, lies of omission or deflection rather than outright falsehoods, and most of the time it's still pretty clear to the audience when he figures something out and broadly what he's planning. But in general, the first time in any given episode where Columbo even indicates that he thinks the villain of the week did the murder is at the beginning of the final scene of the episode where he reveals how they did it, when he starts saying what the audience already knows he's been thinking the whole time. He almost never makes an accusation if he doesn't already have the evidence to completely shred their alibi. Alongside all the lying, the trickster part of his character is mostly dedicated to hiding in plain sight. The bad guys never know exactly how much he knows, how much he suspects, and how much he can prove. He won't even give them the satisfaction of knowing for sure that he thinks they did it. The reason this level of dishonesty works without making Columbo feel in any way bad or unheroic is because of the context in which he uses it. On the occasions we see Columbo hanging out with peers or innocent bystanders, he's just as friendly and jovial as ever, showing that that part of him isn't an act to off-balance the bad guys. He's kind and compassionate to grieving survivors. Whenever a villain of the week tries to frame somebody, he's always very reassuring to them, and every once in a while we get a real glimpse at how he's honestly feeling, and see a man who is profoundly dedicated to the pursuit of justice. We don't get his backstory, we don't get personal angst, we don't get any sort of character arc, just a guy who's ridiculously good at his job, methodically sneaking his way through a web of lies and misdirection until he can take down a smug murderer in a single stroke. Trickster heroes aren't really defined by what they're good at. They're defined by how they use what they're good at. A hero isn't defined by how much they look like a hero, but by the good that they do. Or by how funny it is when they tie a shotgun in a knot and let Elmer Fudd blow himself up. So, yeah.
Okay, and that was Trope Talk Trickster Heroes. I have nothing really to add on here at the end. Yeah, this is okay, maybe I do have a little something to add here at the end. This is a trope that can be hard to write because it is a balancing act, right? You have to make the villain convincing enough as well. Their skill set convincing enough, and that our hero has to think like essentially outside of the box to do it. Or in the case of Andor, right? Our heroes are doing things through different means, and you have to then really convince us of their like heroism, and right, like Saw Gerrera and Luthen Rail would not work as characters if we, the audience, did not believe that they fully believe in what they are doing, that what they are doing is the right way to fight the Empire, right? Specifically, it is Luthen Rail's monologue that that sells his character, I would say, for the audience. His monologue is what tells us his values, right? Who lets us in on the character and what he actually genuinely believes. which is then how the audience can then be confident in knowing he's on the right side of the fight, essentially. But yeah, that was Trope Talk, Trickster, Heroes. I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.